Warren, over the weekend we talked a little bit about this, and you mentioned that you have spoken with Mark Zuckerberg about what he needs to be doing with his company. When did you talk to him?
Last year at Sun Valley.
And what was the basic? Did he come to you, or did you reach out to him?
Well, he or Cheryl or somebody said, they'd like to get together to talk a little bit about Facebook, and so we talked.
Obviously, you've been in a position of taking a private company public. Is that basically what you were talking about?
Yeah, although we didn't exactly. I took a private company public when I was in the tech world and with data documents many years ago. But Berkshire, we never really took public.
Well, you're a public company now. It started out as a private partnership. Sure. When you look at what's happening with Facebook, I know that this is not something you're a fan of, but you're also not saying that at this point you wouldn't buy into it because it's not something that you feel comfortable with, but you don't think this is a bubble scenario.
Oh, no. I'm an agnostic on a company like Facebook. Anytime you get a truly extraordinary business, and it's obviously, it's an extraordinary business, but they're the hardest ones to value, because the question is whether 5 or 10 years from now that they will be as extraordinary as they are now, or they may keep doing more and more wonderful things. So it's just harder to figure out than, we'll say, Coca-Cola. I mean, Coca-Cola 10 years from now is going to be bigger and more profitable, in my view, than it is now. But there won't be some quantum change in either direction. So it's much easier for me to figure out what Coca-Cola is worth than Google or Facebook or, you name it.
Although you did get into technology stocks with IBM, and that caught a lot of people by surprise. Is IBM a very different company than those others? It's
certainly a company that's future will not look as different 5 or 10 years from now, in my view, than it does now, than will happen with a Facebook or an Apple. It can be in either direction. I would never short those stocks, and I'm not saying they have anything but brilliant futures, but I just don't know.
Right. So that's the question: is when it's a fast-growing company in a quickly changing arena.
It's just harder to figure, and it's fascinating to watch. But I don't have to draw a conclusion on even tens of stocks. I just have to look at one or two and feel that I've got a reasonable fix on what those companies will look like in 5 or 10 years.
Okay, Andrew.
Hey, Warren. Question on Facebook, but technology companies broadly. A number of the IPOs we've seen, including Facebook, have dual class shares where the founder, in this case Mark Zuckerberg, really does control the company. We've seen it with Google, we've seen it with Zynga, and so many others. I'm curious, when you think about corporate governance and you think about these dual-class shares, how does it impact you as an investor and as a CEO? How do you think about it?
Yeah, as an investor, it doesn't change my view much. We're buying into a known quantity. When we buy into the Washington Post company, as we did in 1973, the Graham family controlled one of the classes of stock, and actually I wrote Mrs. Graham a letter then, and I said, I knew they controlled it, and that was fine with me. There are a few other people, if they control, if Castro controlled it or something, I might have felt a little differently about coming in. But I think if you know what you're getting into, you make a decision on that. And at Berkshire, we have 2 classes of stock, and we have made a very careful determination that never under any, Berkshire will never sell out or anything, but we make sure that those 2 classes have to be treated identically. I think when you have a situation where the super voting stock can be sold at a big premium if they sell the company to what the diminished voting shares sell for, I think that's wrong. I don't think you should be selling the vote when you sell a company, and I've seen that done. We've had it done to us in some situations way back in the past.
What about with Google? What we've heard with how they're planning on?
I do think that when you get some extraordinary people running a business where the business is very tied to their particular talents, you may want to protect them in some ways to be sure that they get a chance to keep painting their painting over time.
But it's one thing to know what the stock structure is as you buy into a stock. It's another thing to have it changed once you're in.
Yeah, as my memory, I think Dow Jones changed it.
Right.
I think Lee Enterprises changed. There are various companies, I think probably more in the media field than others. A lot of the media companies had a dual structure going in. Others created it after the public was in. I think that gets a little more dubious.
Warren, one of the arguments is that when things are going well, for example, right now things at Google, going relatively well. When everything's going well, there is no problem, meaning nobody's going to come after the company or come after the CEO. But it's actually when there's trouble that as a shareholder, you might want to have a little bit more power than you would in one of these circumstances. No?
Well, I won't argue with that. But I would say this. If you had an extraordinary company back in 1973, Cap Cities Broadcasting was a truly extraordinary company. I knew the company very well. That company in 1973 was selling for a third or less of what it was intrinsically worth, even though it was being managed magnificently. And Tom Murphy and Dan Burke, who ran it, did not have that percentage of stock that would enable them to obtain control. So anybody with money at a time like that could have walked in and taken away a great group of assets at a discount from its intrinsic value, but a big premium to the market value. And that would have been a mistake. But I can pick out examples the other way too. It's not like I'm a big fan of dual classes, but I can see some reasons for them.
Hey, Warren, while we're on the topic of some of the other companies that are in the news right now, can I ask you about Yahoo too? There's news about its CEO that he did not, in fact, have a degree in computer science. And now Dan Loeb and another investor, who I think owns a little over 3% of the stock, are pushing for his ouster. What do you think about what happened in the company's announcement that this was an inadvertent error?
Yeah, well, I don't know all the facts, but just from the few sentences I read, it doesn't sound like an inadvertent error. And I would say this: if I thought that, as a director, if I thought that an officer had consistently misstated some fact to me, I think I'd probably do something about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we actually had that one time, and if you can't trust the people you're working with, you got a problem.
Right.